everyone. My name is Stephanie Eldred, and I'm with the Center for Best Practices. Thank you for joining us today for the Partner with Universities to Build Your Summer Meals Capacity webinar. Before we get started, I have a few things to go over, a few housekeeping items. First, attendees are in listen-only mode, and we will be recording this webinar today. We will take questions during the webinar, so please use the question box for your questions, and we will read them out loud or respond to them individually. We will also circulate the webinar recording and resources later this week. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce my colleague, Derek Lambert, to start the webinar.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I appreciate it, and want to thank everybody for joining us for today's webinar, part of the Schools Out, Foods In webinar series. This is made possible thanks to the generous support of the Arby's Foundation, and we thank them for their support. I want to remind everyone this is a monthly webinar. We today are talking about universities. On May 22nd, we have a webinar about summer meals at public housing facilities, and we'll conclude the series on June 12th with a webinar on summer meals at non-traditional sites. On the next slide, just want to remind everyone again that we, the Center for Best Practices, have a new website, bestpractices.nokidhungry.org. Great resources and information about how you, your organization, and your community can successfully end childhood hunger, especially through interventions around school breakfast, after-school meals, and summer meals, as well as access to lots of research to support that work and to engage key stakeholders. Please visit us at bestpractices.nokidhungry.org. Today on our agenda, we're going to start with a quick audience poll. We'll introduce our panel, frame the discussion and conversation with the Kentucky Department of Education. We have two great featured panelists from universities and colleges today, and then we'll have a moderated Q&A. And as Stephanie mentioned, we'll return to this shortly. If you have questions during any of this event, please go ahead and submit them to the chat box, and we will get to them as quickly and to as many of them as we can. Let's go ahead, Stephanie, and dive into our first poll question, which is really want to see among folks in the room or who are listening today, are higher education institutions present in your vicinity, and if so, what kind? So the question is, which of these are located closest to the communities you serve? Community college, private college or university, public college or university, some other higher education institute, or none of the above. So Stephanie, if you don't mind, let's launch that poll and give folks a chance to respond.
Great.
And just as a reminder, we're asking the 5 options are community college, private college or university, public college or university, some other higher education institute, or none of the above. So Stephanie, if you don't mind, give folks about 5 more seconds to complete the poll, and then we'll close it, and if you can share the results with us.
All right. Okay, so it looks like in attendance today, we have about 24% representing community colleges in their area or that they serve, 21% private college or university, 55% public college or university, and 0% for either the other higher education institute or none of the above.
So what I'm hearing is this webinar could be applicable to everyone in the audience today, that there are higher education institutions in the vicinity near communities that you serve. So today, we're going to dive right in and think about how those partners can potentially help you expand access or even participate in the program to support summer meals. Thanks so much, Stephanie. I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and close the poll, and I'd like to welcome our panelists. We have 4 great panelists today. We have Kathy Gallagher, Section Supervisor of the Summer Food Service Program, the Division of School and Community Nutrition at the Kentucky Department of Education. We have Martina LaForce with Grow Appalachia and the Berea Kids Eat Coordinator in Berea College. We have Gidget Taylor-Sweezy, who is the SNAP Ed Nutrition Program Coordinator, Summer Food Service Program Coordinator with the Kentucky State University Extension. And we also have her colleague, Dr. Christopher Grimes, who is an Assistant Professor and State Specialist for Nutritional Sciences with Kentucky State University. And if we can look on the next slide, we'll have additional introductions when each of those folks comes up to speak. But just want to kind of set the stage by thinking about, the opportunity to embrace colleges and universities as partners in summer nutrition. And for that conversation, I'd love to bring in Kathy Gallagher, who again is a section supervisor with the Summer Food Service Program at Kentucky Department of Education. She has been in that role for the past 4 years and previously served for 2 years as the child nutrition consultant for the National School Lunch Program within the Department of Education. Kathy's past experience includes public health and sales, and she has a Bachelor's of Science in Nutrition and Dietetics and a Master's of Science in Clinical Nutrition. Kathy, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that you and your colleagues at the Department of Ed have done a great job getting the word out about summer meals to bring new partners like these folks into this work. Can you give us an insider perspective as an administrator on what makes these programs special in Kentucky, this work with universities, or how they might exemplify some of the other good work that's already happening in the state? And by way of that, I just want to welcome you and thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Derek. Thank you so much for having me. You know, I think everybody on this call understands that summer meals often need to be provided in innovative ways. In Kentucky, the need is so high, and we really enjoy working with innovative sites and innovative sponsor types. And we kind of have the attitude that at the state agency that if we're going to get lots of kids fed, we have sort of a why not attitude. You know, why not find ways to feed kids that may not be the typical? So we kind of think our university sponsors are very progressive, and we consider them very innovative. And I don't know, maybe it's the mindset that you have at a university to explore new ideas. But we found that these two university sponsors are, and the staff there are so proactive and creative in what they do and in their approach. I guess it's just that innovative approach that they have probably in many things they do that spills over into feeding kids in the community. And they're both it's very obvious when folks hear what they're doing and how they're running their programs. They're very different, but also very effective in their communities.
That's great, Kathy. And just to go a step further before we dive in, can you help us understand your perspective as a program administrator who's engaging with institutions of higher education to support summer nutrition programming or to expand summer nutrition programming either as a program partner or as a sponsor? What do you see that's different when you're getting these folks on board? And has the state agency had a learning curve that maybe you could share with folks on the line about working with universities to bring them into this world?
Well, the first time that this opportunity came up, within this, our system, we just had a little bit of a challenge as far as how to put them into our online application system, speaking of Berea, because we had already established a sponsor there for their Upward Bound program. So just some inner workings with vendor number, that sort of thing, how to put them in our system and identify them as a sponsor number and keep them separate from the Upward Bound program, even though they're on the same campus. So that might resonate with state agency people, that we just had to work around that, but we were able to figure out the way to make that work in our system. That's really, I guess, from a logistical standpoint, the only difference. I think beyond that, they look at opportunities in such a great way that I guess one of the differences we see is they approach each year with such an enthusiasm to expand and improve their programs. Many of our sponsors do, but their innovations and their ideas are just very dynamic. And I think that just reflects working with a university.
That's great, Kathy. And we're going to come back to you later on in the webinar. We may have some follow-up questions for you in addition to those from our audience. So, Kathy, I want to thank you so much for the support you provided to the folks that we're going to hear from shortly and for joining us for today's webinar.
Sure.
Yeah, so just as a reminder to folks, we're going to have moderated panelist Q&A. We've got a few questions here that we'll be asking, but we also are very eager to receive audience questions during today's webinar. If you have a question or comment during any part of today's event, please let us know by entering those questions for staff into the chat box. And without further ado, on the next slide, we're going to get into our first story from the field. We have Martina LaForce, who is the Berea Kids Eat Coordinator for Grow Appalachia, who is going to share with us about her experience working within the organization, providing meals as a summer food service sponsor. I've heard Martina speak before. She's a very enthusiastic speaker who does great work. And Martina, we're so glad to have you today. Thanks for joining the webinar.
Thanks, Derek. I'm happy to be here. I represent Grow Appalachia and Berea College, and we serve as a Berea Summer Food Service Program sponsor and also an after-school at-risk program sponsor So now we're actually working with a year-round summer food service and after-school meal program, which I'll get into later. But our real work is that we work primarily with food security, but we see summer food service as a good chance to meet the meal gap in between. So I just want to give a little bit of brief information about like where we are for some background. So Berea College is a really small private institution. We were founded as one of the first, well, the first interracial and coeducational college in the South. We are one of 9 federally recognized work colleges in the United States. So every student that actually attends school here also works either on the campus or within the community. And that's going to be like a really important thing to consider later on. We primarily work with low-income families. Almost, I think about 90% of the families that are the students that attend here are Pell Grant eligible. And so I think that also is going to be an important thing to think about later in terms of many of the students here actually remember participating with summer food service programs when they were growing up. Or if they didn't, they really wish they'd had it in their community. And we also have a really strong service learning and innovative program that kind of really ties into experiential learning through internship programs, as well as programs such as Berea Core that actually works with students after they graduate to help prepare people for working in the nonprofit sector. And if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And an important thing that I should have mentioned before is that every student that does attend school here does not pay tuition, which is part of our full tuition promise. And so that also is made possible with work-study program funding from federal and state funds. So where Grow Up Appalachia fits into that is Berea College has 8 different commitments, and one of those commitments, which is the 8th commitment, is to serving the region of Appalachia. A majority of our students actually come from the Appalachian region, and so we also have a program that's called Strategic Initiatives. And that's looking beyond how do we connect colleges into the community and how do we get resources that the college has brought into areas where maybe we're recruiting students from. So Grow Up Appalachia was actually founded within that, that program. So we are independently operated from Berea College. We receive our funding from outside sources, so we don't actually receive Berea College funding. And that's important just to think about because that's going to be an important part of when we're making our budget and being realistic about that. But Grow Up Appalachia, like the primary work of what we do is mostly with food security. So we work with 6 different states and 32 counties, and we provide financial assistance and technical assistance to support the development of things like community kitchens, backyard growing programs, healthy cooking and eating classes, farmers market development, and small-scale farmer expansions to the marketplace. So that might include high tunnel building or production plans. And we actually work with the NRCS to create high tunnel production plans and build high tunnels. And so it didn't seem necessarily like a natural fit for Grow Up Appalachia to serve as a summer food service program sponsor. But if you can go to the next slide, please. Great, perfect. So where we're actually located, which you can see a map there, and I appreciate Derek for sharing a map earlier, because some people have no idea where Berea, Kentucky is. They're like, what? But we are located in a pretty interesting area in that just to the left of us, we have a county that ranks, Fayette County ranks as the 9th healthiest county in the state, but just to the right of us in Estill County, they rank 99th in a state with 120 counties. So where we're located, it's sort of like this interesting in-between period where we're just between the Bluegrass region and the Appalachian Mountains. And so I kind of like to consider us a family on a fault line sort of county where we're not necessarily, even though we're part of the ARC County, which is the Appalachian Region Commission, people kind of tend to think that we're more well-to-do than we actually are. We see that we do have about, it has increased in the past several years, but about 30% child poverty rate. And we are a countywide eligible community, so all children are available, free reduced lunch is accessible to all students at all of our schools. Next slide, please. So where all this fits in with Berea Kids Eat, and if you could go ahead and please go to the next slide, because I think that this next one's going to kind of be more important. We are a college-sponsored summer food service program, and we're one of the first ones I know of in the region. One reason I'm excited about this webinar is to learn what other communities might be doing. But we actually work with Berea College staff to serve meals in neighborhoods throughout our community, and then we also provide meals to partner sites such as libraries, camps, and different organizations like that. Since 2016, we've actually served just over 31,000 meals, and we've brought in about $110,000 of savings to different camps and families. Next slide, please. And I made this is very text heavy, and I appreciate this being made available for folks later on after we actually have this call in. But I just wanted to give a quick timeline, and I'll walk through it really quickly of how we even got started. The USDA actually hosted a regional meeting that was connecting colleges to the summer food service program. And Grow Appalachia was one of a few handfuls of representatives of colleges that came. And it just sort of intrigued our director, David Cook, the idea of it, of what does it look like for an organization to work with not only food security, but actually food relief, because many of the families that we work with are struggling just to put food on their tables, and growing food isn't really going to solve that problem. So then he actually approached Berea College, and they'd already had an AmeriCorps Vista that was on staff. And I was working with them on some community gardening and was bringing up the summer food service program, and the timing was just really good. And I kind of became like that community champion that partnered within Grow Appalachia. In the summer of 2015, in the fall, we mostly spent collecting data on our community, having meetings with community leaders, family resource directors, and started looking at like how do we actually design this program. We used a lot of the best practices that were made available from No Kid Hungry and also FRAC too. In spring of 2016 is when we started really bringing in all of our partners, and the most important one was Sodexo Berea College Dining Services. They actually vend our meals. Without them, we really couldn't have gone any further. It wasn't practical for us to partner with a school kitchen because they weren't able to even serve as a summer food service sponsor just because of administrative capacity, and their kitchen couldn't handle it. So that was like a really important step for us, and we were really dependent on that. And then from that point, we just started recruiting students, started working with different departments to get them on board. Our first year, we served for just about 80 days at 12 sites, and then we increased that by the next year by 25%. And our goal is to increase by 25% over the course of the next 3 years each year. We doubled our number of sites, and then also we became an at-risk meal sponsor as a way of creating year-round programming. And in 2018, we're actually expanding to develop community gardening programs at our sites as well. Next slide, please. This is very text-heavy as well, but this is something I'd like for you to be able to have to refer to later, is what is the budget? What does a yearly budget look like for our program? The budget, the expense and cost table to your left actually corresponds with the summer food service program and does not incorporate our Power Up snack program. But when we're looking at, well, where does $155,000 come from? No, we do not work with $155,000, and that's where the in-kind contributions from the college are very important. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one of our biggest in-kind contributions that we receive by working with Berea College is student staff and AmeriCorps labor, which totals about $48,000 in value, almost $49,000. We work with the Berea College Labor Department, the Office of Internships. We also work with AmeriCorps, and working with AmeriCorps also makes it to where we can provide AmeriCorps STEM Education Awards for each of our students. So any student that works with us for 300 hours or more will receive an additional $1,200+ in an educational award. And by working with Berea College students, we are able to also bring in research teams, and so those students have done research such as plate waste studies, participant food waste studies. They've actually helped audit our program and provide a report, and they've also helped us to develop a local food buying and sourcing guide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Berea College and Sodexo Dining Services, again, this is one of our most crucial partners. It's not necessarily an in-kind contribution. However, they definitely took some of the financial helped create a financial buffer for food waste our first year. The first year of a program, I think it's pretty natural for there to be some element of waste, and they helped us work together and actually helped us get a grant to put in a walk-in refrigerator, which was a big game changer. Next slide, please. We work with Berea College Motor Pool for our mobile meal. So most colleges will actually have a motor pool that just sort of sits there for the summer. Our college is really generous, and they provide the insurance and the liability as well as defensive driving classes. Last year we utilized 2 cargo vans, 2 minivans, and a sedan for the entire season, and that valued to just about $5,500 and really made our mobile route possible. Next slide, please. There's a number of gaps that we have with funding sources, and it was important for us to identify those. So while we have a lot of in-kind contributions, what makes our program, I think, really unique is that we don't get all of our money from Berea College. We actually get money from the community and in-kind contributions, and I think that's what really makes our program a community initiative. I think that it can be dangerous for a college to go into a community with sort of like a savior concept of, we're here to fix the problem for you. And instead, what we've kind of focused on is, well, like, what does the community actually want? How do we engage the community and actually bring them on equally as partners? And part of that is by working together to actually make the program possible. So we work with local government as well as faith-based groups. We work with other nonprofits and civic groups. We have small foundations that we work with that help meet some of the gaps that we have for funding, specifically with year-round, paying for a position for a year-round coordinator, which is essential for this program for us. We also have programming partnerships, so we focus on working with like the library, and then our local Hummel Planetarium and organizations like that actually come to our sites to provide programming. We work with local businesses specifically for special events like summer kickoffs and summer spike events. They're really more familiar with how to contribute to events like that. And really a big part of it was creating a year-round operations that could bring in at least some supplemental revenue to our program with the at-risk program. But we really feel that within a community, we do have the wealth that we need to actually generate an existing program that's sustainable. And that wealth isn't necessarily money, but also care, passion, and other resources. Next slide, please. And so it's going to go into our year-round expansion program has been to actually partner to develop an at-risk after-school meal program. Working with as a CACFP site, there are some similarities between the programs and some differences, but the really nice thing is that we're kind of able to create a year-round model because we have a small school system and because we have nonprofits that are really kind of functioning on a bare bones budget. We're able to take on that administrative capacity for them as well as vend the meals. So really they order the meals and pick them up, and we take care of all the administrative work and help recruit sites. And I think by meeting the meal gap year-round and then also working with the community year-round, it kind of makes it to where we don't disappear and people forget about us until summer comes. Next slide, please. Hello? Oh, could you get to the next slide, please?
Yeah, the Berea Kids Eat expansion, Martina?
Oh, yeah, here we go. Sorry, my computer was freezing up. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Derek.
No worries.
Great. And so I'm going to wrap it up here really soon. But our expansion programs we're trying to move beyond basic food insecurity, our food hunger relief, which is kind of like, I think summer food service fits into like a really interesting part of that. I don't consider it necessarily to be the same as a food bank program. I think it's like moving towards a step of slightly more sustainable and more easily accessible to some extent. But we would really like to see more neighborhood food resiliency and sustainability, not necessarily just environmental sustainability, but economic as well. So we're focusing on developing a gardening program. We have one community garden established currently at one of our sites near a housing authority neighborhood. We're also working with a Habitat for Humanity community and a rural development neighborhood as well, with the goal of how can we start small with these neighborhoods where they've already expressed interest in gardening, and how can Grow Up the Latch to help get resources to these communities so that they can grow food and learn how to cook their own food. We're also expanding to include summer weekend backpack meals. So that involves us working with God's Outreach, which is a local food bank, to plug in weekend backpack meals similar to what you see during a school year at many schools into our summer program. So every Friday at our mobile route that goes to primarily low-income neighborhoods, we'll have the backpack meals available. And then we're also incorporating a food recovery pilot to focus on working with local restaurants to collect the food and divert that they would otherwise not be serving, divert it from food waste and turn it into a community meal at one of our sites that can actually then provide meals for adults who bring their kids as well. And so I think that's the really fun part, is that we've only been operating for 3 years now, but that once we got established, we were able to sort of grow and expand our model beyond summer food service. Next slide, please. So some basic highlights from our program is we really just want to focus on what the community itself needs and identify the champions within that. And oftentimes there's more than just one. There's champions within nonprofits, within schools, within neighborhoods. We take a community-based asset development approach. We look at what the community and even break it down to the neighborhood itself already has and kind of build upon that. And I think that having that positive outlook makes it to where we can find what the resources are and meet challenges more effectively. Partnering with, identifying and partnering with institutions, finding what their mission already is and how can they plug that into summer food service. And then year-round programming is really a big part of what we do that makes us economically sustainable. And thinking about more than, can we think beyond federally reimbursed child nutrition programs and think about what else we can plug into that to expand the capacity there. And I think I'm definitely at time now, and I'm looking forward to carrying on with the rest of the presentation with everybody else.
Thank you so much, Martina. This is an incredible example of community partnership and an example of, Grow Appalachia, and by way of your work as well, Berea College, supporting these efforts in the community and beyond the university walls. I have a couple questions. I know we are going to quickly transition over to our colleagues at Kentucky State University, but I did want to ask just one or two quick questions. Martina, it's incredible the amount of in-kind support from student volunteers and the university itself that seems to have really been absolutely essential in contributing to the success of your program. I imagine there's folks on the line who may not actually be associated with universities, but who would love to tap into some of those resources and take advantage of those assets within the community, specifically at universities. What would you recommend as first steps for folks who are listening in and would like to maybe not replicate your experience, but tap into those student volunteers and tap into those university assets? How would they find the right people, and when would you recommend that they make that connection?
Yeah, I think that every college is going to be different, of course, colleges, universities, community college. But typically within a school, there is an internship office, and there's also specific departments that are more likely to be engaged in community service or outreach efforts than others. For example, child and family studies departments, women's studies departments, nutrition departments, and where they're already looking oftentimes for a direct service learning experience for their students. I think that more colleges are starting to take on that model. I can't really speak specifically on the best people to reach out to with each university, but I think oftentimes like a really good starting point is finding the departments and finding department heads or department chairs and seeing what they're already doing, and then seeing what kind of volunteer organizations are listed on the college websites, which are pretty common. And then something that we're hoping to do here at Berea College is actually to provide like ourselves as like a contact point to where we can help connect people within the institutions, especially within Kentucky, and with work-study colleges especially. There's only 9 of them in the country that I know of, but they're definitely out there. And oftentimes I think that master's programs, a university or college that has a master's program can be a really good start for that too. But yeah, I think that when it comes to like a lot of the in-kind contributions, I think that a lot of times it's just like people can't offer it until it's asked. And that's something that I've had to come to learn even within our own institution here at Berea. Oftentimes there's a resource that's just kind of sitting there and it's taken for granted and it's kind of forgotten about. But finding and identifying what those gaps are within your program can be a really big help. And then also kind of thinking about like, well, what's in it for the college? And that sounds kind of self-motivated or too self-interested. but colleges do have missions and they do have requirements, and I think that summer food service can fit into a direct service learning experience for students that can really benefit their programs. I hope that helps.
Thanks. Yeah, that's great, Martina. I had another question. We'll have time for one more, and then we'll dive right into our next panelist. Kayla wrote in and was asking, did Grow Appalachia procure or purchase food items for service in the meal program, or did the Sodexo, your vendor, have that in their budget? So how did you handle procurement, especially given kind of the work the organization does?
Great question. So how summer food service, of course, works is that that there's the opportunity for a sponsor to actually ask for an advance payment if they don't have the funds to carry over the cost until the reimbursements start coming in. In our case, Grow Appalachia already had the money within our organization to support that. So we contract with Berea College Dining Services, Sodexo, as our vendor. They have their own procurement processes that they go through, and we contract with them. But our summer food service program reimbursement rates that are offered from the state of Kentucky actually do cover the cost of the meals just fine for us. We've even been able to create some of a financial buffer to utilize some of the funds for operational costs, such as marketing or equipment that we need to serve. But most of the food, because of all the in-kind contributions we get from the college, a lot of the expense that we have for food, or the reimbursement rate, goes straight into the cost of the food. But really, it's about Sodexo being on board and the director wanting to do this. But to them, they see it as a win-win. This helps them keep their kitchen going during the summer whenever school's not in session or when school shuts down. And it helps keep people employed who want to stay employed. And they have that equipment just sitting there. They'd rather put it to use instead of have it just sitting, and maybe they get started in the fall and it needs some sort of repair or maintenance. So yeah, I think it's going to depend on each vendor for sure.
That's great, Martina. Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll have some additional questions later on in the webinar when we regroup with audience Q&A. At this time, though, I'd like to move on to our next presenters with Kentucky State University and the Summer Food Service Program. We're fortunate to have two panelists joining us today from Kentucky State. We have Gidget Sweezy from SNAP-Ed Nutrition Program Coordinator within the Kentucky State University Extension Office. She is a Kentucky State University graduate with a Bachelor's of Science in Agriculture, Food, and Environment with a focus in food and nutrition. Gidget is the Program Coordinator for the SNAP-Ed program serving 6 counties and also serves as the Summer Food Service Program Coordinator in their 3rd year operating the program. With her today is Dr. Christopher Grimes, who is the Assistant Professor and State Specialist for Nutritional Sciences with Kentucky State University. Gidget and Dr. Grimes, we are so thankful to have you today and for your willingness to share your story.
Thanks so much for having us. We appreciate it.
We're ready. All right. Okay. Well, yeah. You guys can take it away.
Can you go to the next slide, please? So we've talked a little bit about what we have as far as SNAP-Ed and summer food service, but within our extension department under the nutrition umbrella, we also have the FNEP program. We also do quite a bit of community outreach as far as several counties in Kentucky. Kentucky State University is about 1,900 students right now. Primarily, we serve the central bluegrass region, but we have a lot of out-of-state folks that come in to take their education here too, which is great. One of the things that you'll find that's different about us, and we only share this with our sister University UK, is that we are a land-grant school. And so we are an 1890s land, the basis of our work with what we do here with SNAP-Ed and FNEP. Next slide, please. So whenever I came on board, Dr. Grimes had already done most of the early days, if you will. He had done the basis for the summer food program. He had started the application process. He'd already done the groundwork. He just needed someone else, I think, that could just come and kick it off. So I was fortunate enough to be that person, and he hasn't been able to get rid of me since. So, so my first year here that we did summer food service was 2015, and we primarily just worked with on-site camps that year. So what we did was raise some starting funds and to get our feet wet, so to speak. was we partnered with the camps that were already going to be here on campus eating in our cabs. So we had an easy way to monitor what they were eating. The contract was already set up, so we almost came in on the backside and just made sure that they were meeting the program requirements, that the kids were eating what they had. We did some nutrition education with them in the cafeteria to kind of go along with that. And that first year was our learning curve, as well as what gave us the foundation for our mobile units the following year. We did our first mobile unit last year, which was quite an experience in itself. I loved every minute of it, but it was a lot more work than just obviously sitting here on campus and helping kids and doing numbers and administration. But we serviced Henry County, which had no SFSP service the year before. And so we reached out to them thanks to just some homework done with Kathy and with Jennifer. We also used a couple of resources, the Capacity Builder, and also the qualifying data that you get back from the school program. So Henry County is a CEP county, which means the whole county qualifies. But their average free and reduced lunch is right around 86%. So it's a very rural county. They have 4 different little communities within that county, so it's very spread out. But they were very welcoming folks. We ended up servicing Eminent School, which is probably the largest of the little communities that they have. And they service between 55 and 110 kids through summer programming all summer long. So we did breakfast and lunch for them every day, and then we also did lunch at 4 other sites. And Henry County is about an hour from here, so we spent a lot of time in commute, but it was well worth it. They were great people to work with, and we thought that Dare to Care was going to be doing their whole program this year. Dare to Care had done some work there in the county, and they still do with the backpack program, and they really wanted to carry that over into summer, and they're going to do the library and one of the other sites, but we're going to continue to service the Eminent School just because of the large number of meals that they require on a daily basis and some funding that Dare to Care was a little worried about. So we're going to share that responsibility this year, and I think that made them happy to be able to contribute there in the county where they were already doing work, and it makes us happy that we can support that. Our other county...
Gidget, I was going to ask you a quick question right there. How did you coordinate with Dare to Care? It sounds like that's a really important part of this, is that, you know, you guys were working with the local nonprofit to make sure that you guys were kind of rowing in the same direction. Is that right? How did you connect and communicate on your program goals last summer?
Initially, when we went to Henry County to make connections, one of the first places we stopped was at the food pantry. And the food pantry in Eminence is actually run by the mayor. So he was a wealth of information. He is the first person that said, hey, I don't know what's going to happen this summer. Dare to Care does some work here. They do some donations in some boxes with the food pantry. They do the backpack program. Why don't you go see so-and-so down at the Methodist Church? So that was our next stop. And the stop at the Methodist Church was, hey, we don't have the capacity this year. We're not going to be able to do it. If you guys can help us out, that would be great. We would love to have you. So they were very welcoming within the community. They had some problems as far as just, they were a little bit worried about capacity as far as if they were going to have enough staff. They were a little bit worried about funding and some grant stuff they had going on within their own organization for that area. So we were able to pick that up last year and kind of run with it. And we made a call to them. I made a call to them early in the year and said, hey, you know, I'm getting ready to start figuring out what we're going to do for partnership. And she said, I really think we want to do it this year. And, you know, there's enough need around for all of us to get our fair share. So if we had someone to partner there in Henry County where they were already doing local work with local people, we want to foster that and step away and find out where else the need can be met. And so that's exactly what we wanted to do.
That's great, Gidget. And I have a question as well, follow-up for you and Dr. Grimes. You know, it sounds like the university really got outside of the walls of the institution, right? It sounds like you started out serving and kind of coordinating with programs that were already on campus. But really, you've gone out and you're serving, and I want to hear more about the program in Anderson County as well. But how did you get interested in this, and how did you get university buy-in and support to do this work outside of the university walls?
Well, to answer that pretty simply, that is the mission of Extension. And so the fact that we are an extension agency along with the University of Kentucky, we have been mandated to serve the entire state. And so when we began the summer feeding program, it was actually an initiative that was introduced to us by the then president, Raymond Burse. And so he gave us a call and said, there's a meeting going on down in Atlanta. I think this would be great for your program. And when we looked at it, we thought so as well. We thought this would fit really well with our initiatives within our research and extension programs. And so for KSU, of course, we want to make sure that we do a lot of focusing on communities that are in and around Frankfort, Kentucky. But because our program is more than just the summer feeding and just serving those families, we're also doing extension education, nutrition education. We're also doing research in these communities. And so we have a lot of students that actually partner with us, and they do it for summer jobs, quite simply. They also do it because they're part of our nutrition program. They actually get educational credit for this. And so, for instance, this summer, we have an independent study class called Nutrition Education and Partnerships. And so what they're going to be doing is these students that take this summer class are going to be working with the summer feeding program, doing all the implementation and the things that go along with that. But they're also going to be doing some research along with that. They'll be studying different ways that we coordinate the program. They'll be looking at methods to improve our implementation. And so that allows us to be able to really get outside the bounds of Franklin County and be able to serve these other areas. So really the goal and the desire to extend beyond Franklin County comes with the mission of extension, which is really a statewide process.
That's great. And I'm also curious, in this case, you talk about this being right in line with the mission of extension. Was there also a financial investment from the office to support this program, or did that come from elsewhere in the community?
No, most of the funding, and so the funding, the biggest part of the funding was actually paying our employees. And so, for instance, when Gidget started with the program, you were a student at the time, weren't you? And so Gidget was actually a non-traditional student in my nutrition and my community nutrition class. And so we hired her through extension funding to be able to do some extension activities and this. And so that was an extension buy-in. And then, of course, my time and effort was just general extension, because this fits the goals of extension. I mean, because one of the main things that we do, other than just providing the food, was to actually do the education. And so, in a sense, extension wasn't buying the food, because all that was reimbursed and everything, and it was through the camps. But extension was in a sense paying for the time and effort to do the education. Would that be a correct way of saying that, Gidget? And so that's how that worked. And so extension's major involvement would be from the educational side and the programmatic side and reaching out to those communities.
That's great. I appreciate that. And I was going to ask as well, you mentioned kind of moving out, working with Dare to Care in Henry County. And I'm curious, for next year, what does it look like for you folks as you work and extend to other geographies and think about what the program is going to look like in 2018?
So in 2018, we're going to still continue to work with our on-campus camps. We are going to do the mobile route to Eminence, but for that one school delivery only, so that Dare to Care can work through their program, and yet we still make sure that area is completely serviced and covered for meals for the programs that they need. We're also going to extend our service to Anderson County this year, which is near and dear to my heart. That's where I live. It's nice to get to work in my own community. And we have really done some legwork. We have kind of a back door in, if you don't mind me saying that. We have a SNAP Ed assistant there that already works in our school system. And so we were able to sit down with 3 of the family resource officers there within the school, who were able to sit down and say, yes, we need this program. They already have one site in Anderson County, but it is right inside of Lawrenceburg. And so it's a very, again, rural county. So there's a lot of people that are outside of that area that can't walk or bike or be dropped off at that site. So we're going to really focus on outside outlying areas this year. And we actually developed our route in partnership with the Family Resource Office, 3 of their schools, and the library coordinator to find out where they thought the need was. If you really want to know, ask the teachers and ask the folks that work in the school, because they can tell you.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. Thank you so much. That's a great kind of summary of what you'll be doing this summer, and those are some great insights as well in terms of how to identify that key information. Gidget and Dr. Grimes, I'd love to hear, and as we look, at the next slide, what are some of the key takeaways that you folks have taken from this work and that you are either sharing with others or actively integrating into your own work?
I would say if you're not familiar with the program, go to every training that you possibly can. The folks at KDE were fantastic. Kathy and Jennifer and Mandy probably heard from me at least once every 2 days the first year, and maybe once a week last year. They never tell you no. They give you optimistic ways to problem solve, which I love. But the biggest thing I think was I'm really glad we started small so that we could learn how to do the paperwork properly. So we did the training properly, and then we were able to do a great takeaway as soon as camp was over and say, okay, how can we grow next year? Because now we've got all of this stuff under our belt. What's next? But if we had overexpanded the first year, I'm afraid we may have failed.
That's great. It's good to hear that, obviously, and I know we're going to go back to Kathy here in a moment. It sounds like the Department of Education was really important in that. As we go to I know there's a second takeaway is here you wanted to share with folks was to be ready to evaluate and to change the program, and, to be able to think about some of how, you can evaluate progress and look at the program in terms of opportunities to improve in the future. How would you, what are some examples of how you've been able to change your program and evaluate to make sure you're able to best serve the community?
One thing I want to mention to go along with that, and then Gidget can jump in here and talk specifics about the program, because we are an extension agency along with research. Research is important. So one of the things that we're going to be doing here in the future, and we've already started this to some extent, food security and food insecurity, if you will, are an important aspect of our research within our nutrition department. And so, for instance, we already have 4 graduate students working on food security aspects in Franklin County. They've been doing surveys all this entire semester, and they're getting ready to present next week. But one of our goals is to look at gaps, not just in our community, but within summer feeding in general. And when I say gaps, I don't mean negative issues with the program or anything, but places where we can provide, greater education, where we can see greater impact and those types of things. We want to be able to do that research, to be able to help other universities or other institutions, help the programs to know how to be able to reach these underserved families, even to a greater extent. And so one of the things that we're constantly looking at is, how can we, number one, implement more effectively, but also how can we be innovative in a way to be able to reach these students with more than just a meal. And so one of the aspects that we're doing is that this year we're bringing in this converted bread truck, if you will, and one of our goals is to provide technology on that truck so that while the students are actually getting that meal, they can also hop up on top of that truck in the back of this truck and we'll have, our goal is to have like iPads or some other tablet device where they can actually get on these iPads and be able to educate themselves and play nutrition games and reading games and things like that while they're actually eating, just to be able to engage those students more. And so that's another aspect that we're looking at, is how can we rope in other extension type educational programming to these students to be able to benefit them more than just the nutrition and food, but to expand their horizons even more. You want to talk specifically to the program, though?
The only thing I would probably add is that, every time you pick a site, it's a gamble. Last year we had to change around our schedule a little bit. This year I started out with this wood site that I thought was going to be great, and the folks at the local school said, no, we're going to knock that off the list right away because they know, and they said this is a place where people won't come. if they hadn't told me that up front, if I hadn't sought out the right resources and asked the right people, I would have been wasting precious time there instead of trying to deliver, resources to the places it was needed most. One of the other things is that we are partnering with the library. We're going to be doing reading on the bus until we get the Wi-Fi up and running. But she is sending books with us every week for us to hand out at our outlying stops, so that we're going to try to see. One of the research aspects is that we're going to try to gauge how much we saved on the summer slide this year for the folks that were participating in the summer food service program. So I'm real excited about that.
That's great, Gidget. And, I have a question for both of you. One of my big takeaways from what you're sharing is that there may be entire departments or cohorts within universities that would view summer meals as an opportunity to engage within the community to achieve their own departmental goals around education, training, volunteerism. I'm thinking about, social work, culinary schools, medical students, public health, fraternities, sororities. If we have folks that are community-based program sponsors or partners on the line today, they or their site staff, how could they take steps to engage with universities to identify and cultivate these partnerships? Dr. Grimes, I know you mentioned that, extension, that's kind of a part of their mission, is to get outside of the university and serve the community. But if someone's listening on the line and they're not a part of or familiar with the university system, how do you tap into those resources?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the best ways of doing it, is that if there's someone that is wanting to partner with the university, or the nice thing is that when you call extension, you can get on our website and you'll see different departments under land grant. It's all, extension is a part of land grant. And within all those departments, you can call in, and they are very good at directing you to the right person. Generally, if it's a nutrition question, it either ends up on my desk or on Gidget or one of our other directors' desks. And then at that point, then what we do is we do a lot of teamwork, and so we're also very conscious of the other programs even outside of land grant, like computer science and biology and social work, like you had mentioned. And so we do a lot of work with them as well. And so we do a lot of innovation in that regard, and we make those connections very well. And so if they were to call KSU and look for us, and I know that Gidget would be the best contact probably for this. She'd be able to direct you into the right place, and we are always looking for those connections in the community.
That's great so much. That's great. Gidget and Dr. Grimes, thank you so much for sharing on this. And we do have a poll question. I'm going to launch it, but before I do that, I'm actually going to go over it quickly here. We just want to see how folks plan to engage with their local higher ed institution to support community outreach and awareness, provide volunteers, explore whether the kitchen facility may serve as a vending outlet, sponsoring a program, or serving meals as a site. How do you see universities as being able to support the work of summer meals in your community? I'm going to ask Stephanie to go ahead and launch the poll and leave it up for a minute. And Kathy Gallagher from the Department of Education, while that poll is launched, I'd love to hear from you. What are some things that stand out to you? And what would you recommend to folks on the phone who are really thinking about opportunities to work with universities? What has been, something that you've learned through this process that you would want to share either with state agencies or sponsors out there that may be working with universities and state agencies to encourage these partnerships?
Sure, Derek, and I just want to say thank you to both KSU and Berea for just sharing the great things you do, and I think everybody will understand why these sponsors are near and dear to our hearts. Everything from involvement in community gardens, and Martina did mention also the farmers market there in Berea, to SNAP Ed and enrichment. These are so important to us as a state agency in many ways. They just cover so many areas. Also the use of student volunteers and research. How wonderful. We would love to engage more colleges and universities around the state in serving community meals. And, this has been really very easy for us because these folks have been so motivated and so interested in serving in their community and doing such great outreach. You know, I know in Kentucky we have a lot of campus-based residential camps, whether it's Upward Bound or other type camps. And one suggestion I would have to other state agencies is that having at least that open door with whoever you work with in those camps might give you an opportunity to explore and find somebody on campus that might be a champion for a community-based summer meals program. I'm sort of speaking to myself here, to be honest, because we could do more of this as well. But I think that's really key, is identifying somebody on those campuses that really wants to get the program off the ground. And for us, it was really easy with these two great organizations that we worked with that we've heard from today. But I think that would be a very important step. And
Thank you so much, Kat.
Networking, network as much as you can as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kathy. And Stephanie, I'm going to ask, I know we've got the poll question pulled up. What were the results from the poll?
Definitely. So it looks like 59% said that support community outreach and awareness, 13% said provide student volunteers, 9% meal prep, and 13% sponsor a program, and lastly 6% for serve meals as a site.
That's great. It sounds like there's a lot of folks want to help with community outreach and awareness and working with universities, but it sounds like there's a cross-section of ways that folks are recognizing that universities could be partners. So hopefully today's webinar has been an encouragement, provided some good information. We will be following up, as Martina mentioned during her presentation, with the recording of this webinar and the slide deck. And I want to thank our panelists today, Martina LaForest from Grow Appalachia, Gidget Sweezy, and Dr. Grimes from Kentucky State University, and then also Kathy Gallagher from the Kentucky Department of Education. I want to thank everyone that served as a panelist and for those that listened. And also want to remind folks about our webinar next month. We'll be covering summer meals at public housing facilities. You can register with the link that will be embedded in this slide deck when it goes out. That webinar is Tuesday, May 22nd at 2 p.m. Eastern. And before we close today, I want to give a special thanks to my colleague, Stephanie Eldred, for the work that she's done, not only with this webinar series, but within the No Kid Hungry campaign. She's been with us for right at 3 years, and tomorrow will be her last day with us. She is moving on to bigger and to better things. So Stephanie, it's been a pleasure to work with you, and thank you so much for all you've done for us, for this community, to support summer meals and other programs.
Thank you, Derek.
Yeah. All right. With that, thanks everyone. Have a great day, and we look forward to touching base next month, May 22nd, for summer meals at public housing. Have a great day.